Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in your sight, my Lord, my strength, and my Redeemer. Amen. Good morning. So I have to be very honest, this is not my original sermon that I wrote for today. Doing something that I love yesterday very much, the Lord spoke to me in a number of different ways that I felt were more important than what I had prepared. I also experienced a whirlwind yesterday, which I reflected on making my sermon about our Old Testament reading today. But I feel like Galatians was where the Lord was talking to me. Perhaps my whirlwind story would be best for another day. Let me tell you something about me that you might already know, or if not, you're about to. I'm a fly fisherman, but I'm not just a casual one. I am a dry fly fisherman. I believe there's nothing more sacred than watching a trout rise to the surface and sip a hand-tied imitation mayfly or mosquito off the water like it's the most natural thing in the world. That moment, still, alert, reverent, is about more than sport. It's a form of prayer, a spiritual discipline, maybe even a liturgy of its own. I actually spent all day practicing that spiritual discipline, fly fishing with my brother Jesse yesterday. Now my brother, who I love dearly and who knows how to fish, he prefers wet flies. Streamers, nymphs, subsurface stuff. And while I respect his technique and even admit it's sometimes more effective, I still give him a hard time about it. He'll say, "You can't catch fish on poetry, Jamie." And I'll say, "Yeah, well, you don't have to give up beauty for efficiency." But the truth is, we fish together because the connection matters more than the technique. The communion matters more than the catch. We disagree about how to do the thing we love, but we love doing it together. And isn't that just like church? Isn't that exactly what Paul is addressing in Galatians? Because what we're really talking about here in fishing and in faith is freedom and what we do with it. Freedom for love. Paul begins today's passage with this powerful declaration: "For freedom, Christ has set us free." Not freedom as an escape from rules or an excuse to indulge everything on a whim, but the kind of freedom that leads us into deeper relationship, freedom for love, freedom to serve, freedom to grow into the image of God we were always meant to bear. And then Paul says, do not use your freedom as an opportunity for self-indulgence, but through love become slaves to one another. Now that's not a cozy phrase. That's a hard turn. We start with freedom, and suddenly Paul's talking about becoming slaves to each other. It's almost like Paul is talking out of both sides of his mouth. Like, seriously, bro, what's up with that? Like, where do we go with that? What gives? Paul is flipping the script on everything the world says about power, control, and autonomy. He's saying the kind of freedom Jesus offers isn't about independence. It's about interdependence. It's not about escaping responsibility. It's about choosing love, even when it costs you something. It's like being on the river with someone you love, knowing they'll fish differently than you, but choosing again and again to stay in the same water, to match your rhythm with theirs, to celebrate each other's joy when they hook a beautiful brook trout or a bigger than average rainbow, even if your line has stayed quiet for hours. Paul continues to outline this for us by two competing streams of life, one flowing from the flesh and one from the Spirit. Now let's be clear, when Paul talks about flesh, he doesn't mean our skin or our bodies are bad. This isn't an anti-body theology. Paul's not against pleasure or humanity or embodied joy. What Paul means by flesh is our tendency to turn inward, to close ourselves off from love, to see freedom as something that we hoard rather than something we share. And what does that life look like? Paul lists it: fornication, impurity, idolatry, sorcery, strife, jealousy, anger, quarrels, dissensions, factions, envy. The list goes on and on. But the pattern is clear. These are things that isolate us, things that destroy community, things that aren't private moral failures, they're fractures in relationship. They're the emotional and spiritual equivalent of tangled line, broken tippet, and lost flies. You might still be in the water, but you're not fishing in harmony anymore. And then Paul gives us the alternative: life in the Spirit. A life that's not about checking the right boxes or following the best techniques, but about allowing the Spirit to guide you. By contrast, Paul writes, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And let's pause on that phrase, fruit of the Spirit. It's not fruits, plural. It's not a spiritual buffet where you pick what you like and ignore the rest. It's one fruit, organically grown in us as we walk in step with the Spirit. If you've ever gardened or fished, you know something about patience. You don't cast once and expect a trout to bite. You read the water. You observe the hatch. You choose your fly carefully, not aggressively. You wait. Likewise, the Spirit doesn't demand immediate perfection. It invites us into a long, slow formation. That's why Paul says, if we live by the Spirit, let us also be guided by the Spirit. Some translations say, let us keep in step with the Spirit. That's fishing language right there. To keep in step with the Spirit is like matching your rhythm to the water. It's like knowing when to cast and when to pause. It's like trusting that even when the river seems quiet, there's life underneath the surface. It's slow, holy work. And that's a word of grace, especially for those of us who feel like we should be more patient by now, more peaceful, more kind, like the fruit should have already ripened. But fruit doesn't ripen on command. It grows when it's rooted in good soil. And we are good soil when we live in community, walk humbly, and return again and again to prayer, to worship, to the sacraments, and to love. This is something our Episcopal tradition gets so beautifully right. We are not a church that says everyone has to fish the same way. We are not a church that demands purity as a price to belong. We don't ask for perfection. We are all broken. And that's okay. We are a church that says, come to the water. Bring your fly rod or your spinning reel. Come if you're dry. Come if you're soaked. Come if you're ready. Come if you're doubting. Just come. And as we say in our baptismal covenant, will you seek and serve Christ in all persons, loving your neighbor as yourself? Will you strive for justice and peace among all peoples and respect the dignity of every human being? Will you continue in the apostles' teachings and fellowship, in the breaking of bread and in the prayers? And we respond not with perfect confidence, but with the honesty of grace. I will with God's help. That's what life in the Spirit looks like. Not perfect doctrine, not flawless technique, but deep, patient, faithful love. Imagine a church like that. A church where love isn't abstract. It's baked into every casserole delivered, every hand held, every voice lifted in prayer. A church where joy isn't forced, but bubbles up from deep places, even in grief. A church where peace isn't the absence of disagreement, but the presence of grace in disagreements. A church where patience isn't just long-suffering, but an active commitment to walking with people, especially when they're hard to walk with. A church where kindness is culture, where generosity flows freely, where faithfulness is a daily choice, where gentleness is power and self-control is freedom. That's the kind of community Paul was calling the Galatians to become. And that's the church the Spirit is still building right here in us at Nativity. So here's my prayer, beloved. that we would fish together even when we cast differently, that we would learn to see disagreement not as a deal breaker, but as an opportunity to love more deeply, that we would be free from shame, from performance, from pride, and free for love, for connection, for the long, slow work of the Spirit. Because at the end of the day, it's not about what kind of fly you tie. It's about the river you stand in. It's about the company you keep. It's about the way you live, not for yourself, but for love. So may we walk by the Spirit. May we live in love. May we fish with grace. And may our lives bear fruit that feeds the world. Amen.